Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for tonight for the information session focused on the sustainable service delivery for the Little Lake, Sakinaw, Ridge, and Painted Boat wastewater treatment plants. My name is Remco Rosenboom, and I work as the General Manager for Infrastructure Services at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I want to start by acknowledging that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the lands of the Shishot Nation and the Squamish Nation. This evening, we have a panel of SCRD staff who I will introduce shortly, and they will provide great information about the sustainable service delivery, and most importantly, there will be lots of time for questions. Our session this evening will also be available on YouTube. There's some housekeeping to do. There are three ways to ask us questions. One is by raising the little hand you see at the bottom of your screen. The other one is by typing in a question at the question and answer feature, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And the last one is in the chat function, which is also at the bottom of the screen. Raising the hand or through the Q&A are the preferred ways of asking a question. If you raise your hand, I will just introduce you. I will just allow you to ask the question directly to the panel yourself. I'll unmute you. So to my panel for tonight, we have with us Carl Doyle. He's our manager of asset management. He's nodding. And the other one is Shane Walkie. He's our manager of utility services. So I will start off by asking Carl, maybe you can start with providing us with a little presentation.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll just share my screen here. Great. So we're here today for a wastewater information session. Today, we're going to be talking to the Lily Lake, Painted Boat, and Sakinaw Ridge facilities. If you're not in one of these facilities, you're more than welcome to join us, but we're just going to try to keep the questions specifically for these three facilities. So today, we're going to just talk about why we're here. We're going to talk about how we set wastewater rates. We're going to go over some of the current challenges that we've been faced with sustainable service delivery at these services, talk about the financial state of play, go over what we've done in the last few years and what we predict to do next year, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. So since 2019, we've been doing a service review for the wastewater services. We've done a series of engagement, and in mid-2022 this year, the board directed staff to develop a comprehensive plan to engage with the wastewater services. That included the development of individual spaces on the SCRD website, which you can find at letstalk.scrd.ca/wastewater. These sites are locations where you can go to find up-to-date information about your service. They also offer a place to ask questions and see questions that other residents have asked and staff have answered. So that's a great resource for you. If you have any questions about your service, just make sure you check on the website first. It will probably be where you find your answers. In early September, we hosted a session just on general sustainable service delivery. Again, that's linked on the website I said. You can find it on YouTube. And then we hosted an in-person session where we invited residents to come down to the Field Road office and ask questions to the staff. So since those two were fairly successful, we've moved on to specific virtual meetings, and that's where we are here today. So a question we are often asked is how are rates set? We collect two revenue streams from wastewater services, and they have different purposes. User fees are collected from users, and those are properties that have a house on them or a user. This revenue is intended to fund the operation, maintenance, and repair costs associated with delivering the wastewater service. So because we're not allowed to borrow for this as per the Local Government Act and just typical municipal financing rules, we like to build up a reserve fund to make sure we can fund anytime we have significant repair work that has to be done. The way we set the rates for user fees is we project the annual service costs and including a contingency to build some reserves divided by the number of users in the service, and that is the rate. Now, Painted Boat is an example where there is a commercial user and there is a different commercial rate that's set for them, but typically that's the typical base of it. So for frontage fees, This is a revenue stream that is intended to fund capital projects, infrastructure replacement as pieces of the system wear and age out. So these are collected from all the parcels that are in the service area. We like to build a reserve fund, and this allows us to offset borrowing demands when we have a large project. The way we do this is we project the expenses that are associated with replacing the infrastructure on a 50-year basis, and we determine a rate that allows us to have a sustainable service. So just go over some of the current challenges we're seeing at these three services. At Lily Lake, we've been doing a retrofit of the internal treatment process, and we've ordered a significant number of parts, and they're on the way. We're hoping to complete that in the near future. Painted Boat has seen some recent repairs, including the installation of a flow meter, and there's no major current challenges, but we're just monitoring the repairs to make sure they're working as intended. And at Sakinaw Ridge, we're seeing some minor vegetation encroachment at the treatment plant and around the disposal field. One of the questions we've been getting a lot during these sessions and through communication with the community is discussion about a previous practice where we would mail out the financial information about the service along with the bill. And that practice was never stopped. We just have it posted online now, I believe. So every year, the SCRD posts the financial plan for the following 5 years. And the links for these are on the Let's Talk pages for your wastewater services. What is on the screen now is what it looks like in the financial plan. If you navigate to your wastewater pages, you can find this and look at it in detail. It shows the expenses, the revenues, and the other financial information for the last year. And the adopted budget for the next 5 years. As far as capital planning goes, we have a long-term capital outlook for every one of our 15 wastewater facilities. And what we do is we have projected what would happen if we make no significant changes and we just increase the rate by 2% per year. And then we've looked at if we do some proactive financial planning, how we can perhaps reduce the cost of the service for the residents. So Lily Lake has some work coming up, and if we borrow as we project to conduct the work, we'll see the rates increase to finance that borrowing. And from there, the rates will be fairly steady for the next 50 years. This is actually one of the services where, because of the near presence of the borrowing, and if it occurs in that order, we see a similar result by proactively raising the rate to there, just because it's a near-term project. So either of these scenarios results in a very similar outcome. Now, I should just mention what is being presented on the screen here. I work with these intimately, so I'm very familiar, and I forget to go into the description, but this is a time graph on the x-axis and dollars on the y-axis, and you can see this is the capital costs of the projects. The projects are represented by the bars on your chart here. They are broken into the different components in the infrastructure components in the wastewater service. And then the lines on the bar represent some different things. We have the blue line representing the projected reserve balance, the brown or the maroon line, perhaps depending on your screen, representing the debt that we project along the way. And then represented on the secondary axis is the fees, the frontage fees associated with it. And we represent those in both current day dollars in the darker green line and 2022 dollars, just so you can see how if the inflationary rate wasn't there, it would be a consistent cost across the service. And that is the target for sustainability, is the equal cost in future dollars. So for Lily Lake, we're looking at what happened in the last 2 years here. We had, like I said, the plant has been undergoing an upgrade. We had a float fail in the spring of 2022. And in a similar time, we had a power outage that required emergency call out when the system shut down and had to be restarted by staff. In the near future, we hope to finish the plant upgrade and then resume routine monitoring. For the Painted Boat, the financial information can be found in the financial plan. The links, like I said, are on the Let's Talk page. If you have any questions about that, feel free to leave a question on the Let's Talk page. We can always get the finance people involved to clarify anything if there's complicated questions. So Painted Boat for the long-term capital outlook. If we were to do no proactive increases to the rates, we see that we have a project in about 25 years. That's the drain field replacement. And then shortly after that, within the next 10 years, the treatment plant is approaching the end of its useful life. And so in that scenario, the debt increases significantly, and we see a little bit of a jump up to a higher rate here caused by that debt. So if we were to do a little bit of proactive planning and we maybe increase the rate in the near future, we could bring down the overall cost of the service significantly. And the future wouldn't see those spikes associated with the debt from those infrastructure replacement projects. So for painted boat, there's been some work done there in the recent past. We've replaced some UV lamps this year, and we installed a flow meter for the residential source that was required for our permit. We've had a control issue with the restaurant flow that has been diagnosed and repaired, and we're just continuing to monitor that to make sure that a repair is sticking. Next year, we're planning to replace the other half of the UV lamps, and that's all that's going on there. Moving on to Sakinaw Ridge, again, the financial information here showing the revenues, both frontage and user fees, the expenses broken down into the various categories, and other financial information is available on the Let's Talk pages. So for Sakinaw Ridge, being one of our relatively newer systems, you can see, similar to Painted Boat, most of the expected work is at the back end of the system. And so if we don't make any changes in the near future, we don't really notice it until we start bumping into some of these projects where we have to borrow. Again, we project if we did a bit of proactive financing here, we could reduce the overall cost of the service and then avoid those spikes that we see where the capital costs have necessitated a high frontage fee. Sakinaw Ridge had not a lot of work there happen in the recent past. A snow event caused a tree to block the access road, and we've had to clear a bit of vegetation, and there's continues to be some vegetation that needs to be cleaned up around there. And I think that's it for my presentation on these three. So if there's any questions, I'm going to stop sharing and look for some questions in the chat and the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carl. So, good. So the preferred way to ask a question is or by raising your hand and I will promote you, or by putting it in the question and answers. And I see the first question showing up in the question and answers, and that's on the Little Lake chart. What did the $738 represent? Would you be able to pull up the slide again for Little Lake to financials?
Okay, are we seeing the Lily Lake financial slide there?
Yep.
So
no, the 738. Maybe it's the financial table.
Oh, let me go back here.
Financial plan table, I think. Yep.
$738. Let me see the chat. Sorry, I must have missed the question.
726 it is.
Oh, yes, here we go. So it is, yeah. Move forward here. 747, 726. I think these are the two slides we're talking about here.
Ah, so gotcha.
I'll go over it again there. So the what we're showing here is the projected frontage fee, and it's on the other axis over here. The dark green line represents the dollar of the day. So a dollar in 2071 would be have less value than a dollar that from 2022, just the way inflation works. So the light green line shows 2022 dollars. So if you don't account for the inflationary increase, this is a flat rate. But we've just SCRD policy and financial planning, it's good practice to account for that inflationary increase. So we're trying to demonstrate that we're achieving a sustainable rate while still representing the fact that the rate does increase with inflation. So 726 would be the frontage fee from, my apologies, from 2029 to 2072 in 2022 dollars.
Okay. Hope that's clear for you, Alex. Otherwise, maybe I can have you ask the question and allow you to talk. I got another question here from Tracy, and I will let her ask the question herself. Tracy, go ahead.
Thanks. My keyboard's too small to type on right now. I just actually had a question about the financial plan forecast budget for the next 4 years. The way that it's presented, it looks as though there wouldn't be, or you haven't budgeted for there to be any increases over the next 4 years, but I don't think that's correct. Is that just a process thing? You have to wait for things to be approved, or okay.
That's exactly it, Tracy. Until the board approves a budget amendment or an increase in fees, it's not representing the financial plan. So we've been doing, at this time, the board's approved single year increases at time. And one of the things we've talked about and has come up with a lot of residents is the desire for us to have a 5-year or a multi-year structure, just to provide some consistency and some certainty for the cost of these services.
Thank you. And if I can just ask a secondary part to that, do you think that, because I know the plan you presented a couple of years ago talked about, I believe it was $100 increase to frontage fees every year for the next 5 or 6 years, and then flatlining, or not, a 2% increase after that. Is staff suggesting that following that same plan? And I'm asking just because I'm trying to get our own budget together for Painted Boat for next year. So I'm thinking I will plan for that same $100 increase for each of our units.
We're trying to
maybe this is an opportunity to also explain how our budgeting process works by Shane or yourself. So you're muted.
That's a great. So these capital plans are used to project the cost of the service, and then we go to the board and we present them, and subsequently we make recommendations for the frontage fees. The board would be deciding on whether that's appropriate, or if they agree with us on that side of things. So when we first presented the plans in 2019, we had used some more conservative inflationary estimates, and we're still developing some of our understanding of the componentization of the plants. So since then, we've come down to a standard 3% inflation rate for the construction of the material, and we've worked with utility staff to have a better understanding of the components. So the value, what we're projecting now for a Painted Boat, is that a 4-year period of increases of $60 a year would get us to a sustainable rate. So it's, we've come down a little bit less conservative than our previous estimates.
And as you touched on, Kyle, the board makes the final decision, Tracy. So staff will present 3 options. Usually, like with operating, we will suggest three options. One that will provide pay for underfunding and possibly some projects and things like that, and increase in inflation on the pressures from inflation on the operating budgets. But the board may choose to not do an operating project, or may choose to only increase the rates a certain amount. So it's the final decisions up to the board, and we will present them with options.
Thank you. I really appreciate that information. That's helpful for me in my own budgeting process. If I could ask just a very general idea about user fees as well, I'm assuming they'll increase. If I planned for a 20% increase, is that sort of over? Are my bases covered? I don't want to go back to my owners needing more money as the year progresses, and our budget is due before your budget is out. So. Right.
Unfortunately, my internet isn't working right now. I was hoping to have some more documents to look at and give you more specifics, but a number of the plants need a large increase, and some don't need one. So we think right now. So I can't remember specifically about Painted Boat, unfortunately, Tracy.
Okay, I can maybe send an email for a bit more information later. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers.
Thank you.
So thank you, Tracy. So maybe in addition, so what is going to happen in terms of timing? We are going to late November We finalize our recommendations to the board. They will be presented to the board and discussed early December. And then if the board approves the rates for next year, then we actually finalize our bylaws, and it all needs to be finished by the end of the year. So it will be early December that the rates for next year will be actually confirmed by the board. And I have another question here from Mike Stewart. I will add you to the meeting. Mike, you can ask your question.
Yes, please. Thank you. This is about the Sakinaw Ridge wastewater treatment plant. I'm one of the developers of lot 31. And actually, I believe the other developer is also on the line, Dan Griffith, but he can't talk right now. This is not about that particular subdivision, but I am curious on a technical front about some of the reasons for the Sakinaw Ridge treatment plant and why it was designed the way that it was. I understand you guys were talking with our engineer Kevin Healy, but getting the information on a technical level is kind of hard. So I thought this would be a cool opportunity to get it from you guys directly. So the plant, as I understand it, you tell me if I'm wrong, the plant is like oversized at the moment. This is what I understand, because there's not enough houses that are connected to it. And it has capacity for, I think, 29 houses, but there's only, I don't know, 10 connected to it or something like that. From a technical perspective, is that okay to keep it running like that? Would it be better to have more houses connected to it? I think with our lot, you guys limited us to 2 houses. But would there be a possibility for expansion in the future for the number of houses that could be connected to it? I'm curious about that.
I think this is a perfect one for Shane to start off on.
Yeah, so Kevin and I work on a number of projects, and so the Sakinaw Ridge, as with all wastewater plants, is designed for this subdivision that it's that's going to be using it. And so Sakinaw Ridge wastewater plant was designed for I believe it's 30 lots, and the users on there. And then there are some covenants on some of the properties, including the property that you're discussing that has 2 on it. So plants work better when they're getting the amount of effluent that was designed for them. So the more users on that plant, the better the effluent would be, and the easier it would be to treat. We have some wastewater plants that are very, very low, and they're challenging to operate, where right now Sakinaw Ridge is reasonably easy to operate, though the flows are very low. Did I get all your questions there, Mike?
Yeah, that answered half of it. The other half was, is that something that's fixed? Is that 30 limit to 30 houses fixed, or does that change? Is that something that you would consider changing?
If in the past we've reviewed plants, and currently we've reviewed plants that to see what the capacity is. Some of the plants that have been designed at a higher safety volume, I guess you would say it as, and we've had assessments of plants to see if there is capacity available in the plants, and I think there may be capacity in the Sakinaw Ridge plant, but that's still to be determined.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from C. Alexander. I'm going to promote you to allow you to ask your question as well.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. And hi, Mike Stewart, you're a neighbor I haven't met yet. I apologize, having been at the SCRD all afternoon, I missed the first part of the meeting. But I wondered, with respect to Sakinaw Ridge, Kyle, knowing that there is a good chance of the Veranda Ridge, I know they're talking about trying to tie in into our wastewater treatment. That how many users is the projection it's called the long-term capital outlook? Is that based on the current situation with the current number of actual houses and lots? I can't hear you, Kyle.
Yes, it is. It's based on what we know for now until, you know, the service bylaw changes, which states the number of participating properties and, you know, the boundaries and that sort of thing. We have to kind of base our financial planning on the known knowns.
When your projections go to the board and they have to pick out of their 3, do they have to pick the same for every wastewater plant?
Nope. No, they can, yeah, they choose based on the individual plants.
Okay, just because looking at the front loading here with the chance that we would potentially have 12 new users in 2 years, would love to go a little more modest in the short term here before we got big, just saying.
Absolutely. And you know, this thing we review on an annual basis. So if there was starting to become, you know, a more concrete formalized agreement, it's something that we might account for a bit more.
Last question. When I had gone through the Talk to Us or whatever site and drilled down, there was a section that said we could look at the sustainability report that was done on this treatment plant. If we hit a link on such and such page that I did not find, maybe because I was using an iPad. But looking at the long-term capital outlook, what is the current projection on the lifespan of our wastewater treatment plant?
The Sakinaw Ridge plant, I think, was built in 2007.
That sounds right.
And so typically the plants have a 50 to 60 year lifespan, and then, you know, the different components obviously make up that lifespan. If the treatment components can be retrofitted in the existing concrete tank, maybe you can use that concrete tank for a longer period, but 50 to 60 years is typically the standard used for this sort of projection.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And going back to what you said, Kyle, and you'd mentioned that there's 12 other lots. You know, projecting operating and capital rates, as Kyle mentioned, we need to go off of what we know, and we know that there's 30 lots in Sakinaw Ridge. If there's a development next door or part of in the area, maybe that will affect rates in the future, but we certainly have to go with what we know right now, and that's the current service area for the Sakinaw Ridge.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have another question in the Q&A on Lily Lake. Is it still your plan to have current owners pay 100% of the future capital replacement costs, or are you looking at funding via user fees, borrowing, and grants? I think this is a perfect question for you to answer.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'll just go back and share my screen so we can talk about that if you give me a second here. And so, yeah, we're just pulling up the Lily Lake display we were looking at earlier. We do intend on using debt, and we project debt. So you can see here in 2045, we see that there's some treatment plant components and some drain field being projected for that time. And we save up about half and we borrow about half is what we're seeing here. As far as grants go, we're not, you know, there's 2 issues with us projecting the use of grants, even though historically, you know, we've been successful when we've applied for grants at a pretty high rate. From a financial planning, you know, best practices and legal perspective, we have to make our projections based on things we know. So our financial plan from the next 5-year basis has to be based on what we know. We can't project things we hope for. And then, you know, we've received direction from the BC government, the Ministry of Housing, which issues a lot of the grants for these sort of things, saying that we shouldn't project, we shouldn't plan to receive grants. So we don't, but we do where we can leave room for debt and, you know, subsequently grant funding on major projects as we project them forward. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and to touch on that as well, Kyle, we have been very successful with grants. We also have not received grants when we'd wished we had. So Canoe Road and Merrill Crescent, 2 other wastewater plants up in your area, were fortunate a few years ago to get grants for $65,000, $75,000. And also Wood Creek Park, a wastewater plant we have down in Gibson's, was fortunate to get I think it's $700,000 grant, something like that. A few years back, Square Bay got one, and we've applied for one down in Langdale, and I'm hoping to hear about that in 2023. But I also know from experience, when you apply for grants, you just don't get a number of them, and so you can't forecast your capital replacements on hoping you'll get a grant.
And I think to add to that is not all grants will fund 100% of the project cost. So sometimes it's only 70 or 80%. So then there's still an own contribution required. And I think that's one of the reasons why Kyle in his long-term plans are always including a portion to be self-funded, so that any portion of a grant that is received at least can be funded, and it's not resulting in significant increases in the funding at that time. Is that correct, Kyle?
Well, that's just it. And you know, to be successful in grant applications, you have to demonstrate that you're doing this sort of long-term forecasting. Your asset management practices are becoming a critical part of grant applications, and you have to prove you're able to fund the portion, like you said, that you're allocated to. So if you have an 80% grant and you have no reserves, you may not be eligible to receive it sometimes because you're not able to fund your portion of the project.
And so many of these plants nowadays, they're $1 million or over 1 million. So that means the service area would have to provide it, with the 80%, as Kyle said, $200,000. You have to be able to show that you have those funds to contribute to your portion of the grant.
So and then I see two follow-up questions here.
Yeah.
This one: have you ever successfully obtained a grant where 100% of the capital costs were funded?
We've been told from our grantors that the presence of a capital reserve is not a negative on your grant application.
Yeah.
It doesn't count as a demerit towards your application.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I think there might have been one. I can't remember if there was one in the past, but generally speaking, they're about 83% at the most. Somewhere between 50 and 83%. So normally it's at least 17% you have to fund and you have to commit to that. When in the grant application, you have to have a board resolution committing funds if they get the grant.
But I think it's not that if you can fund it yourself, that as a result, you're not eligible for a grant. It's even if you were to be able to fund 50%, not that you have to fully commit to the 50% before you can get a grant.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the question is, if we had the money in the reserves that's available to pay for the upgrade, would it be able to receive a grant? And it would be, yes, you're still eligible for the grant. Yeah. And I see a question there from Tracy about feedback on rate plans. If you have any feedback, you can send it on the Let's Talk pages. You're welcome to talk to your area director as well. We've had some resident groups get together and send a letter in that we were brought to the board's attention individually, and if we receive feedback, we'll always share it with the board and let them know what we're hearing from you.
Yeah, but I think, as you indicated, the Let's Talk page is a good way of asking a question. You get a feedback, you get a response, but the rest of the users on your system will get the same response. So I think that will, because it will be visible on the site. So I think that's definitely a preferred way of asking questions. Okay. Another question that frequently coming in through the Let's Talk page is, maybe Shane, you can explain this a little bit in terms of oversight over these facilities and how they changed over the years.
Yeah, the wastewater plants in the past were something you just sort of installed and sort of forgot about, I think. Well, that's not anymore. We have regulators checking up on us often, and we've also decided at the regional district we're going to do a better job of looking after the wastewater plants. We have permitting that we have to meet, and that's why we put a meter in a painted boat. You have to report your flows out of the plants. We have staff that are really involved in the plants. Again, in the past, you know, it was just sort of like keeping it going, but we've changed the way we're doing things. We're improving the plants, and with Kyle, you know, we're forecasting and saving for the future. So things have changed a lot, and you know, it's good to be part of a process where we're really aiming for that best effluent, not just to keep the plants going, but to actually have a really good plant and improving them day by day.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anybody else in attendance? Yes, Gordon, I will allow you to ask your question. You're good to go, Gordon. Ask your question. I think you need to unmute yourself. Are you able to unmute yourself, Gordon? Or otherwise, you can always, of course, type in your question in the Q&A.
I look like I'm unmuted at this point.
Yeah, you're right. Go ahead, Gordon.
Okay. As I was saying, I'm a quarter owner in one of the units, and I understand that there's actually 3 separate plants on our site, one for the spa, one for the restaurant, and then the other 31 residential units. Is that correct?
We have the residential units and the commercial unit coming into our plant, so I'm not sure which other ones you're referring to.
Okay, so what I'm curious about is when you're talking about frontage fees and operational fees, you don't maintain a separate accounting for each of the 3 parts of our units there, the spa, the restaurant, and the residential. That is up to on-site management. In this case, Tracy was online a few minutes ago. And I'm just wondering, you were talking about flow meters. I understand that from when I owned a condo in Vancouver. That's how the city of Vancouver maintain fees. But I'm just wondering, where does our responsibility as a strata, where is our responsibility? Where's that line in those systems where we are responsible for maintenance and any repairs, as opposed to the part that the regional district staff are looking after?
As far as I know, Gordon, we don't look after the collection system in that area. So, you know, we would look after the plant itself and I believe that disposal field.
So we are, so to help me understand, Kyle, so the disposal field is ours, the plant is, we manage it, and the collection system is up to strata, and we flow meters in place, so we know how much is coming from strata and how much is coming from the commercial facility.
Yeah, there's a flow meter on the commercial, and we just installed a flow meter on the discharge of the plant.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and that's to satisfy the environmental permit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, for the whole system.
Yeah, and Kyle had touched on as well, there's a UV unit on there that's part of our permitting, and their bulbs are very expensive, but we replaced half of them this year and half will be replaced next year.
Right, so those bulbs are they all collectively together for everything on the site, or are they separated into different groups for the spa, the restaurant, and the residential?
So again, Gordon, as far as I know, they're on the discharge for the entire plant.
Okay, so I'm just trying to ask some questions to clarify we have to, this is a complicated site in that we have two commercial entities plus the residential, plus which includes 31 units and quarter ownerships in each of those. And I'm just trying to figure out how Tracy, our accountant, figures out where the total cost that's coming to our site from our regional district, how it's going to be, how we can divide it. In other words, we have to share those costs. It's just like water, for example. I understand that possibly there's only one water meter to our site, yet we have 3 different entities using the water. And I don't know, I haven't quite understood from what you said so far, whether there's enough information regarding these flow meters that would help Tracy and the accounting department allocate what percentage should be paid towards the whole cost of our operating and finances to you at the regional district. Do we have enough information that you can provide? These are the flows from each of these locations or not?
I believe we have a meter on the commercial restaurant and a discharge from our plant. So I don't know what other information the strata or forgetting what you heard, the person you were discussing there, what she needs to determine her strata fees. But I would assume that the strata fees are based on the rates that we're charging your strata or the person responsible for the property, and I'm assuming your fees would be based out of that. But we could provide. I'm pretty familiar with the plant, but I wouldn't be able to walk you through the entire collection system and particulars. Gordon, if you have particular questions, it might be more useful if you put them on the Let's Talk page, and then I can maybe research them a bit for you.
Yeah, and so what I understand from Gordon's question, I'm not sure if we're able to answer that question now. If we have the hand, is how are the rates set for the strata versus the commercial rate? How do we internally also do that split? Is it based on flows? Is it based on actual flows, estimated flows, or how do we do that? I think that's more where the question comes down to. And so the question here is, do we have that, or is it better to answer that question on the Let's Talk page?
I think it would be better to answer it on the Let's Talk page, I think, unless Kyle, unless you have the answers.
No, I just, when it gets to crosses that property line, it starts to be uncertain from our side. I know what we would charge, like from a frontage fee and from a user fee perspective. Maybe that's a good question for us to sit on the Let's Talk page and maybe even follow up with an email.
Yeah, because Gordon, good question, and I saw Tracy's hand going up and going down again. So what we'll do is we'll provide an answer on how we set our rates and how we divide the rates on the Let's Talk page. Is there further questions required? We can always do that through email or a phone call.
And if there's anything we can help Tracy with that we have available information wise, we can definitely sort that out on the back end. So
yeah, I guess the other thing is you're projecting in 2048 that the whole field will have to be replaced. And in a previous presentation a couple of years ago, the number that was suggested was something in the order of $750,000. I'm just wondering, are we doing enough to maintain the life of that field, or are there things that we should be like good practices to make sure that we're not overtaxing that system prematurely, or are there things that we could be doing to extend that life?
Degradation of the field will be caused by if you're putting bad effluent into it, and as far as I know, it's good effluent going into it. It's also keeping root intrusion and plant growth down on it, so it's grass, but are there big cedar trees next to it that are putting roots into the system? An example of that is Greaves Road. We've just found a couple runs that are near trees that have got lots of roots in them, and now we're going to have to maybe replace portion of it or try something else. So those are the things that you could you could do to help out is mainly, I think, in that area is the roots and keeping the grass down.
But in addition to that, Shane, at an earlier meeting, you provided a really good answer on the question: what can any user, how can they help to maintain the facilities? What should they do and not do?
So that was specific about the fields. But one thing that's really frustrating for the operators is having to deal with stuff that's put down the toilets or down the sinks that really shouldn't be put down there, such as grease, hair, just garbage. And so all of that garbage and all of that grease, it doesn't disappear. It has to be taken out of the plant. And it's very costly. We either have to get vac trucks in to pull it out, or else people actually have to rake it out with a garden rake and put it into a garbage bag and dispose of it. So the end of the plant going out to the field, it's good effluent, but the process prior to that, the very first process, is to basically separate all the garbage that's being put down the toilet and down the sinks, and then treating the rest. So if people would not put products down the toilet that shouldn't be there, that would certainly help out the operators and improve the efficiency of the plant.
Okay.
I think it would be very helpful as an owner and for everybody who operates, that functions on that site, that if you have a list of recommendations, if you could forward that to Walter or Tracy to distribute to the owners. And I think something like that, because we do have a portion of the units that are rented, that those kinds of information should be posted in each suite on an ongoing basis, just like the collection of the sink waste that we're now trying to collect and keep it out of the garbage dump. Coffee grounds going down my septic system, we've never done that. And, that's something that maybe not everybody thinks about. The other thing is we have our own on-site laundry. And I don't know what is the impact of, would have an awful lot of water going through that laundry system and into your system there, into your plant. And I'm wondering, have you encountered any problems where there's too much soap, there's just the volume of water is causing any problems for our plant to be able to keep up at certain times, like in the summer, or just curious?
Yeah, Gordon, I haven't heard of any problems like that. For the units, having their washing machines is typical. The extra laundry that the spa may put in, hopefully they're being, full loads and hopefully there's not too much, but I haven't heard of any negative side effects to that, but it could, if there was excessive amount of water relative to, food in the plant, you have problems in the plants where there's just not enough bugs, or the bugs die off because there's not enough food. So, it can cause problems, but I haven't heard of any in this plant.
Okay.
All right. That's kind of my group of questions that I've been thinking about for a while. And if
Thanks for asking them, Gordon. Thanks very much.
If you have any recommendations you could forward on any of those topics, that'd be very helpful, I think.
Yep. We'll take a look what we can do there.
I think there's some best practices on the Let's Talk pages. And if there's not, I know Aiden's looking to update them in the near future. So we'll be having some best practices, but basically the same as any septic system. If it's not poop, pee, or toilet paper, it shouldn't go down the toilet. So.
And Carl was just mentioning the name of Aiden. Aiden is our manager of communications at the SCRD. I see two other questions here popping up. One is, what is componentization? There you go, Carl.
Yeah, so I think that's something I said earlier. Basically when we're projecting cost forward, if we have a wastewater treatment plant, one thing to recognize is that we didn't design or install any of these wastewater treatment plants. We inherit these from developers. And so some of them, we don't have all the best information, and we take similar costs for a replacement of plant. Now, as we componentize plants, we look at breaking them down into their individual components, like the wastewater tank, the treatment processes, the UV lamps, the blowers, and the pumps. And as opposed to having one monolithic price for the replacement time and schedule, we then have the smaller parts, which are a bit more accurate representation of what we're going to see happen and the costs. So that's what componentization refers to when I say it.
Perfect. I think that's a clear answer. Another question from Alec Thompson is, are the 14 units at the supportive senior housing facility currently being built at Little Lake Village going to be individually metered? Shane, do you know the answer to that one, or Kyle?
I think the answer would be no, they'll be charged per unit.
Okay, they will be charged just like they will start paying the rate just like everybody else on the system.
I believe so, yeah. And that plant was built with that building in mind. So there is a separate train, a separate compartmentalize, as Kyle would say, there's separate tankage for that facility at Lily Lake. And so I was going to touch on Lily Lake and Painted Boat are fast plants, which means that the type of process they do. And the sewage goes into a trash tank, a large tank where the solids settle to the bottom, and the floaty light stuff goes to the top. The stuff in the middle is called gray water. It goes into what the fast plant is. It's just like this honeycomb of plastic, and then we introduce air to it, so that gives the bugs air to breathe, and there's food in there for them. After that process, it goes into a clarifier where, again, stuff settles to the bottom and stuff floats to the top. And then from there, it gets discharged up into the field. But before that, it goes through the UV, which kills off most of the bacteria after they've done such a wonderful job. But we kill them off, and then we send it up to the field, and it's disposed in the field. And Sakinaw Ridge is slightly different. It's called a whitewater system. It has tankage and a large sand filter that it puts it through before it goes up to the septic field.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, Shane. Okay, I don't see any other questions from people on attendance. If there are no further questions, I would like to thank you all for joining us. As I indicated, if you have any further questions, feel free to put them at the Let's Talk pages, and then we'll answer them also there. There is another question. Can you repeat the answer on how they will be charged? So they will be charged the same rates as the current users of the Little Lake system. So they will be part of the group of users of the system. So they will be charged the same rates, and those rates, as earlier indicated, for 2023, they will be determined at the board meeting and committee and board meeting early December this year. Okay. If that was it, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope we were able to clarify some questions for you. At least I found it always very interesting to see what kind of questions are coming up, and I'm glad that we're able to answer some of those. Okay, have a good night.